This is Leora Balinsky, and these are the Teshuva tapes. Okay, so we are in the fourth parak, and we're going to be focusing on a particular part of the fourth parak, the last halacha, halacha hey. But before we get there, I just want to summarize what we're talking about in this parak in general. So the Rambam says that we have arba'a v'esrim dvarim me'akvim et teshuva. There are 24 things that, I'm going to use the word impede, okay, that impede teshuva. And then he goes on to enumerate what those are. And he concludes the parak by saying, Kol elu hadvarim v'kiyotze bahen, af al pi sheme'akvin et teshuva ein mon'in ota. Even though these things impede the process of teshuva, they do not prevent teshuva, okay? The point is that these are things that make the full teshuva process more difficult. But the idea isn't that, if you've done these things or if you have these characteristics, teshuva is not possible for you. No, not at all. It's just that these are things that once you do them, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you. But there's still light at the end of the tunnel. You're still able to do teshuva. If a person does teshuva, then they become a Baal teshuva, a Baalat teshuva. And you regain your portion in the world to come. Right? I think for those of you who have been following along, the stakes are very high in the Hilchot teshuva in general. And it continues being that way in this parak as well. But again, there's still a possibility of returning, of doing teshuva, even after these are things that affect you. So I want to focus on the different categories very briefly. So the first category is really bad sins, basically. Arba mehen avon gadol, really big bad sins that are really hard to do teshuva from, okay? Like the impact of what you did is so great that it's difficult to do teshuva from them. The second category are things that lock the gates of teshuva before you. And what that means is things that you do, that the implications of what you do make it hard for you to do teshuva, such as being korish min hatzibur, such as separating yourself from the community. Once you separate yourself from the community and the community's norms, the community's ways, it's hard to fall back into teshuva once you don't have anyone around you who is instructing you how to do it or who is modeling it for you, okay? The third category is things that are bein adam lechavero, but you don't know who you harmed. And that's really hard to do teshuva from, because if you don't know the person that you harmed, how are you supposed to really make restitution for that? And now we get to Daled, which is 4 things that are difficult to make teshuva on because they are things that people don't take so seriously, and it doesn't occur to them that they're such a big deal. And then the final category, which is what I want to briefly talk about with you all, is 5 things. We're in halacha hey at the very end, if anyone wants to read it inside. Mihen chamisha dvarim ha'oseh otam yimshoch or yimshech achareihem tamid. Do you guys have nikud? No. Yimashech achareihem? Okay. Yimashech achareihem tamid v'kashim hem lifrosh mihen. So these are specifically 5 things that a person who does them, yimashech achareihem, what does that mean?
They follow after them.
So I think you will follow after them. You will be attracted to them. Exactly, that's the example. And then it's difficult to separate yourself from them. And so those examples are, right, Maya? The first one is? And the second one is Lashon Hara. Baal Chema, that means being an angry person, okay? Like V'yamalech Haman Chema from Megillah. Ubaal Machshava Ra'ah, a person who has bad/evil thoughts, which I think we are meant to understand as thoughts of doing bad things or thoughts that violate precepts, thoughts that are intrusive potentially, unwanted negative thoughts, okay? And the fifth one is Hamichaber LeRasha, a person who becomes connected to a wicked person, becomes under the influence of a wicked person, and who will then be inclined to follow in that wicked person's ways, okay? So those are 5 things that the Rambam says that they become habitual. I think that's a way of understanding what he's saying. That you do these things, or you fall into habits of doing these things, it's really hard to stop. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this was because it's something that feels true for me in my personal life, that I know that there are times in my life where I have been very careful about not speaking Lashon Hara about anyone. And it's really difficult, but I think it's definitely really, really worth it. And then there are times where I've let myself be more lax on that. And once you start, it's really, really, really hard to stop. So that's the example that for me jumped out as something that feels very true. Also, because once you start gossiping specifically, it's just easy. It's a way to fill up the space with people you might not know very well. It's a common form of discussion. And there's something fun about it, and there's something that we're inclined to do. And even though it's something that is so harmful. And so I think specifically, I'll get you mine afterwards, I think that is an example that Rambam is really on the nose of about when it comes to things that are hard for us to break. And these other ones are maybe more, I don't know, I personally don't relate to them as much. It doesn't feel as resonant to me on a personal level, but that might mean that I should explore more how these things actually do affect me. Like, when do I become angry or quick to anger? How does that feel, and does it end up replicating itself when I do that? Or when I have like really negative thoughts about things. But what I also want to say is that even though these things are habitual and hard to abandon, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are your fault for doing so. And these are things that might be hard to break. And part of that is that no one is expected to do tshuva entirely on their own. Tshuva is an internal process, but it's also something that happens in community. So when it comes to gossip and Lashon Hara, if you're in a group of people who all speak Lashon Hara all the time, it's not going to be easy to stop. And what that means is you have to find the right people around you who will be having types of conversations that you want to be having that don't involve that. Being angry, quick to anger, and also having these negative thoughts that you don't want to have. Those are processes that it's really hard to stop that on your own, but with the aid of a therapist or with trusted friends who you can talk to or with other confidants, that's something that can then help you to improve that or overcome that or control it in a different way. And also becoming friendly with a wicked person, it's hard to leave that person and their influence if you don't have other people to back you up as well. And so I think part of the idea here is that we need to not only break these negative habits, but we need to do that by way of forming positive habits in community with others who reinforce what we want to be doing, whether it is peers and friends, whether it's trusted therapists, whether it's our parents, whether it's teachers. And so I hope that we can know for ourselves that how we are now isn't how we always have to be. And I'm really talking to myself now, and that we should have the faith that we are capable of changing for the better, even if it seems impossible, and that we can trust in our friends and in good people to help us make it there. And that's it. Shkoyach.